think we live in a pluralistic reality.
What does that mean?
I think that diversity is like just what there is. So we only come together if we work to be together, to create things together, because the world is a diverse place.
Is there a reason why you believe that there is no absolute truth?
I don't think there's an absolute truth with science. I think we have different ways of understanding the world, and we create worlds according to those understandings, right? So I always like to say to my students who are more on the atheist side, well, if you don't believe that imaginary things affect our lives, show me the number one. Those don't exist. These are constructs that we use to shape the world around us, and science is based upon mathematics, which are numbers, but you can't go and pluck a number one off of a tree, right? Where's one? Where's two? You can't live a hopeful life if you're certain, right? Because certainty doesn't require hope. I think certainty causes a lot of problems in the world, causes a lot of destruction. And to live in the face of and acknowledging, right, our humility, right, that we don't know what is ultimately quote unquote right or true or good. We have to live in hope that we are moving in the correct direction.
The executive order, you saw the inauguration, one of the things he said was, now declaring that the United States of America only has two genders, male and female. What comes to your mind? Is that dangerous? Is that a threat to society? Now that he said that, what do you think about that? I don't know. I was watching a video on the way here driving that in science it's like pretty much two things, right? You believe in science, you believe solely in evolution and say, well, I believe in evolution. This is how we got here. There's no God, there's no nothing. But then it's kind of hopeless because it's like, okay, well, what happens after life? What happens there's not really anything to that. Well, no, we're just here and that's it. And then religion and spirituality offers, well, there is hope and there is an afterlife. What you're doing here isn't meaningless. And equally so, like, if you see someone like a Hitler, say, well, he's going to be judged for what he did. Mm-hmm. And science is kind of like, well, no, everybody goes to the same place. It's kind of like a hopeless thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think a lot of people get to religion through theodicy, right? The problem of evil.
Okay.
Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yes.
Why do children get cancer? All these sorts of things. And a lot of times people get to religion through asking those questions. But I do think, for me at least, I think religion at its core, right, in the Latin term,
yes,
is about reconnecting and rereading. So it's binding back together things, religare in the Latin. And so what that means is that religion at its core is about meaning making. And I think that you can use, you can find meaning in religion, you can find meaning in nature, you can find meaning everywhere. So I don't see the traditional world religions as the only outlet for meaning-making practices.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. What?
I was just going to say, so there's a whole effort by some groups of people called religious naturalists, and they want to look at evolution as a spirituality and the universe story, right? It's like we're all part of the same expanding universe, and that's kind of amazing, right? That we're recycled atoms, for billions of years, and we're the same recycled atoms that were there in the beginning, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's a form of connection, I think, that actually interpretations of evolution or cosmology can give you, right? So it doesn't have to be meaningless, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Would you say that all religions can be true?
I think there are truths in different religions. I don't think that I call myself a viable agnostic. And that means not that I don't believe, but that we live in certain bodies that are there for a while and then not. Okay. If you look at even if you use scientific tools to look at the universe, you can only see so far, and then it shades off into the microwave background radiation, and we don't know if there's something outside the universe. It's a multiverse, right? So the whether scientific or religious or philosophical, you have to give a little bit of room for something, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think atheists say nothing, and full-blown theists say there's God, right? Mm-hmm. And I just want to say, I don't know.
But have you, obviously this is what you do for a living. Mm-hmm. Have you explored the different religions to say, maybe this makes sense, or maybe this is the part that I don't know?
Yeah, I've explored mostly all the monotheistic faiths and a good deal of Buddhism, different types of Buddhism, and a little bit of Jainism and Hinduism, but obviously nobody can explore all of them.
Yeah.
But I think at the core, for me, the core of most religions has to do with, in their origins,
Okay.
for instance, they have to do with a movement, right? The Roman Empire is unjust, so we need something else. Moses takes slaves out of Egypt, right? The Buddha says extreme poverty, extreme wealth are not good. We need a middle path, right? Everybody can be enlightened. We don't have to live in this caste system, right? And so at the core of religion, I think, is that movement towards justice. And I think that's what is most, quote unquote, true. And I mean that in a, not the sense of that there's something out there that you can reach that's called the truth, right? I mean it, that what's true to me about religion is this idea of expanding concepts of justice to all people, to the rest of the natural world, and this sort of thing, right? Expanding ourselves to be open to others, compassion, these sorts of things.
Yeah. So you're saying that you think that each religion was started at a particular time to solve a particular problem, such as what you're talking about with Moses and you're talking about with Buddhism and
Yeah, I mean, I don't think every religion, for instance, maybe not
well,
indigenous,
most of the monotheistic.
the monotheistic ones,
Okay.
yeah. And of course, Buddhism is atheistic for some people because there's no God, there's
Yeah.
enlightenment. But I mean, and then of course, indigenous traditions are a bit different,
Okay.
right? Indigenous traditions are attached to place,
Yes.
and this sort of thing, right? So when you want to tell the story of your people, you walk around the landscape and you tell the story of your people by moving through space and time and physical places. So, for instance, in this country, when they removed indigenous peoples to reservations, it also destroyed their identity and religion and this sort of thing. So, but anyways, point being, those didn't necessarily originate out of a move for justice or something like that. But the religions that have grown out of sort of, let's say, the ancient Near East, right, and India, I think especially are usually because of some sort of move to right or wrong.
Okay. Do you think, is there a reason why you believe that there is no absolute truth with religion?
I don't think there's an absolute truth with science either. I think we have different ways of understanding the world, and we create worlds according to those understandings, right? So I always like to say to my students who are more on the atheist side, well, if you don't believe that imaginary things affect our lives, show me a letter. Show me the number one. Those don't exist. These are constructs that we use to shape the world around us. And science is based upon mathematics, which are numbers, but you can't go and pluck a number one off of a tree, right? Where's one? Where is two? Right? These are concepts that we use to shape the world, right?
Yeah.
And we create certain worlds based upon certain beliefs and ideas. So I think there are many different types of worlds we could create. For instance, maybe we need to do something in the modern Western sort of reductive scientific world to address the issue of climate change, right? To address the issue of overconsumption and species extinction due to the fossil fueled world that we live in, right? Is the fossil fueled world true? Sure, but it doesn't have to be the only world. We could create another world. We could make another world that wasn't based upon fossil fueled reality, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, yeah. Now, the other part to it, which is something that I've been more curious about, because, we were interviewing, I interviewed Imam Samara. He was a religious Muslim pastor, imam, and I was talking to him. What does it mean to be a Muslim? What does this mean? And then I asked him, I said, well, do you believe that there's multiple truths, or is this the absolute truth for you? He said, no, because this is the absolute truth. And then I interviewed somebody last week or the week before, and they said, well, truth is subjective. Now, my thing is, I think there's historical evidence backing each and every single religion. Do you take that into account and saying, well, maybe the historical evidence of Jesus, maybe the historical evidence of Christianity, that may be an indicator as to it being a little bit more than just a way of life?
I mean, I've done some dabbling in the historical Jesus scholarship stuff, and to me, the person of Jesus or Moses or the Buddha, these were, to me, revolutionary figures. Right? I mean, the first 200 years after the Jesus event, right, there was no solidified church. There were Jesus communities and Jesus followers, and they tried to live in different ways and live communally and all sorts and practice all different sorts of ways that they disagreed with the Roman Empire about. And so it wasn't really until you get to around the 4th century that there's a more the Nicene Creed, right, that formalizes the beliefs of the church and formalizes the Bible, right, that chooses which Bible, which books of the Bible are going to be in the canon, and which ones get left out. So there's a whole extra canonical text, right? Like they found at Qumran, right, the Dead Sea Scrolls, right?
Yeah.
Most recently, well, in the 1960s. But so my point being that there was no orthodox, sort of this is what you have to believe if you are a Christian until about 400 years after the event of what was Jesus. So I think that history matters, and I think it matters because it helps us, I think, to interpret what the meaning of whatever this person was trying to say against the Roman Empire, right? And what this person was trying to fight for. So I think those historical things matter.
So you're saying that there was a 400-year period where there was no direct instructions or no Bible or no anything for...
Well, yeah, I mean, there was not a canonical version of the Bible. People were reading all different sorts of texts about who this Jesus person was. And of course, for most of history, even well beyond that, right? Most lay people didn't start reading the Bible until the Reformation, right? Because it was in Latin. So you had to go to in Christianity at least, you went to the church and the priests read in Latin to everyone. And so they have all the, the rituals and the icons and the images are all because that's what people could understand. They didn't know how to read, right? And so it wasn't really until the Reformation, when the Bible was first translated to German, then to vernacular language, that people began to read in the Christian world the texts of the Scripture. So,
do you know exactly what was being said? I mean, obviously, I know this isn't your direct field, but in your your research of it, do you know what was being said in those different texts, or was it more or less same stuff?
No, there's a lot of stories that overlap, and then there are some like the Gospel of Thomas, right, is a famous example. That was one of the texts that the church didn't want.
Do you know what it said?
Because it sounded like everyone can have their own relationship with God, right? And the priests had a vested interest in saying, no, you have to go through the church, right, to get to Jesus, to get to God, this sort of thing. And so it was more like Christ is in you, Christ is in me, sort of thing, is in all of us, right? Rather than the church being the official, way to Jesus, right?
Well, I think that's, at least now in the scripture that we have now, it's not like that anymore. It's, you have a relationship to the Father because of Jesus. So I think that church part has been cut out. But the reason
in the
why
Protestant world, for sure,
yeah,
more so.
Well, I would say, I'm actually very curious because, like I said, I interview different religious figures, and I want to interview, somebody from Catholicism, because I know that's similar to how they have it. I don't think that's in the entirety of it. Again, I'm learning. That's what I want to do. But at least what is in the Gospels and what's in the Bible is that Jesus came so that you can have a relationship with God, because there was sort of a separation when you look at the Old Testament. That's the point of Jesus. And now the reason why I bring up Jesus is because we live in a country where we're predominantly Christian. So, it's obviously the, faith that I know best. I'm also a Christian. But I always have this like confusion when people say he was just a messenger or just a revolutionary, because I don't think there's been another messenger that claimed to be God. And that's the part that always, is like, well, he could be a messenger, but then he claimed to be God. And Muhammad didn't do that. Buddhism didn't, or how do you say Buddha? Buddha didn't do that. I mean, Charles Darwin, like nobody claimed to be God except Jesus. Is that something that you take into account where you say, well, that is different that he's saying that? Or
well, he also said he said he was the new Caesar, the new ruler, right? And this was a direct confrontation to the Caesar of the Roman Empire, right?
He said that?
This is a new kingdom, right? A new kingdom to get rid of this unjust kingdom and I am the leader of that new kingdom, right? And so that was to me, these were confrontations against an unjust empire, right? So, and I mean, of course, there are others who have claimed to be deities and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a long tradition of that.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he was, because that's not in his scripture, but there's an example where he was in the markets and in church, and people were, or no, somebody came to him and said, "Hey, like, should we pay taxes? Tell us, like, should we pay taxes?" He said, "Well, give to Caesar what is Caesar's," and it was a coin, or whose face is on the coin? It was Caesar's. Well, give to Caesar's what is Caesar's, and then, pretty much saying that. I think what I take away from it is that his kingdom is his kingdom, and then the kingdom that he's talking about is an eternal kingdom. It's not so much a replacing of, Rome, but so much that I think people were in a time where, yes, there was a lot of injustice, and people wanted to find meaning, people wanted to find God, and I think Jesus Christ came to be that Messiah and that middle way. But I think when he was talking about his kingdom, it was more so a spiritual kingdom.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily agree there, because remember, Jesus was a Jew after all.
Yes.
And so this idea that the reason that Christianity
The mic, sorry, just so it picks up.
the reason that Christianity sort of splits off from background Judaism
Yes.
is because certain people think that this is the second, or the Messiah, right?
Yes.
And other people don't.
Yes.
Right. And then later on, of course, you have Muhammad and Islam branching off from
Yes.
the monotheistic faith. So I think all three of these together are different interpretations of very similar understandings of God and reality and this sort of thing. Whereas if you go to India, for instance,
Yeah.
you're not necessarily going to find people talking about God or monotheism, because that's not there. It's more that you had the Vedic background.
Yes.
And you had the Buddha and Lord Mahavir, which became Buddhism and Jainism,
Yes.
and everything that was left over is called Hinduism, right? So all these religions are mixed up together, right?
Okay.
So I think it's really hard to separate out, this is the true interpretation of Judaism or Islam or Christianity, because they're all always mixed up together and they're interpreted differently in the different places they go.
That is something that I've always wondered, because, you see online, I mean, when you talk about somebody that questions Christianity or whatever it may be, it's more so along the line of, so what would you say to somebody that was born in India, somebody that just never got exposed to the gospel, never, so you're saying that they're going to hell, how could you say that's unfair? That's, I think, something that I've always wanted to ask whoever I interview, but I think that's a valid point. I think culture has a big determining factor of what it is that you end up believing in. But equally so, are they different interpretations, or are they just completely different things?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the problem of unity and diversity that all the philosophers and but yeah, I think we live in a pluralistic reality.
What does that mean?
I think that that diversity is like just what there is. So we only come together if we work to be together, to create things together, because the world is a diverse place.
Okay.
And so I think that some people suggest that there's a couple of metaphors for the different religions,
Yes.
and some people say that's like many different paths, same mountain, right? Mm-hmm. You're going up, Buddhists are going up this way, Hindus are going up this way, and so that's what some people, I understand it as many different mountains. And we can hike down and up them and through them, but they're different mountains, right?
Yeah.
So they're not all trying to say the same thing. For instance, Christianity has been widely interpreted to suggest that humans are made in the image of God,
Yes.
and therefore somehow above all the other creatures, above the earth somehow, that we can be stewards of the earth, that we're better than other things because we're made in God's image, right? Mm-hmm. Some would argue that very taking humans out of the rest of the natural world has helped lead to the environmental crisis that we're experiencing now. Whereas if you're in Buddhism, everything's related, right? It's all part of the same tapestry. Mm-hmm. In indigenous traditions, there's much more of an understanding of kinship with humans, with other animals, and this sort of thing.
So what that is implying that you have the same worth as an animal or like a living tree.
That other things are also valuable, right? That they also have inherent worth. It's not just humans.
Yeah, that would make sense. 100%, yeah.
Yeah.
I think when you talk about the Bible, it was that they were given dominion, and I think that, well, that is the truth, because again, like, we're stewarding something. Like, what, it's not a religious thing. It's just we're stewards of it, because trees can, I mean, they can take care of themselves with the natural stuff, but animals, like all these different things, they were given dominion over them to watch over them. Now, it has been a societal failure. Like, yeah, of course, there's not the best stewarding, but I think we're still given dominion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, then a lot of people have interpreted that. And of course, in Islam, you have vice regency instead of stewardship, being managers of the earth. I think a little bit differently than that. I think that we are like, I like the two different creation stories in the first part of the Bible. You have the 7-day one, then you have the garden story. The garden story is actually older, but it appears second in the Bible. But it actually is much older, and you can tell they're different, right? Because it comes from a farming community, right? It's the garden. It's Adam and Eve coming from the dirt. Adam simply means as Adamah, from the earth. So Adam is a mud creature, that is like all the other creatures, right? Created from the mud, right? And so I think that there is a sense in which you can interpret this idea of dominion from the Genesis narrative and subdue the earth and this sort of thing. But then you can also pay more attention to the garden story or to Noah's Ark, for instance, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And dominion does it mean sort of controlling, right? And does it mean factory farms, right?
Yeah.
Does it mean industrialized agriculture? Does it mean the deforestation of these sorts of things? So what does dominion mean in this case? Yeah.
Well, I would say those things are also not, again, it goes back to just being a steward. Dominion is you watch over, like you are in charge of it. Doesn't mean, I mean, you could say it as control, but we're also given free will. So yes, we were told to do something, and we were told to steward the earth, and we were told to be fruitful and multiply and replenish. But obviously we're not perfect, and we have free will, and we have the choice to. And I think that's why you see, exactly what you just said. It's because of free will, not so much because of like God's fault or because he gave it to us. And then it's more so that, we have free will, humans make mistakes. And then I think that's kind of how I interpret it. I don't know if that's.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say, I think we don't give other life enough credit and we give ourselves too much credit. I think that we have some decisions. What does complete free will look like, right? I can't create the world out of nothing, right? This would be the ultimate free will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we are born into certain times and places by nothing we did, to deserve that or to be there at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just sort of it happens, and then we have like this much space to maneuver, right? We don't have this much space, so I do think that humans have quote unquote choice and responsibility, and so I think one definition of a life is the ability to respond, to be response able, and then in humans we've become that's developed into responsibility, right? Because we have so many choices, right?
Yes.
And that sort of thing. So I guess what I would say about the free will thing is I don't want to blame. I don't want to blame humans. I don't want to make humans too great or too bad, right? I don't like the idea that you're born and already you're just screwed.
Yeah.
Because you're born into sin, right? I don't like that idea, but I also don't think we should put humans on this giant pedestal above all other life on the planet, right?
Yeah.
There's wisdom to be found in intact rainforests and the communication of mycelium underground, right? And the way that elephants communicate or octopi or there's I think a lot of deep intelligence to be found in the rest of the natural world as well.
Yes, I would definitely say so. The reason why I asked you the first question is because of can all religions be true? Because going back to a conversation I had a couple weeks ago, it's kind of like it's cool having a podcast because it's not like you carry over the previous conversations. Like, okay, I learned from this guy. Now let me bring it here and let me ask that. And it's cool because you genuinely learn. And again, that's the point of this. So I can learn so that people watching can learn. Again, the reason why I bring that up is because almost, if not all, religions contradict each other. So it's like, yes, inceptions, and they kind of sound alike. Oh well, this makes sense and this makes sense. Oh, I can take both, but each of them have a different goal and a different mission and a different end goal and a way to get there that kind of contradicts all of them. That it's like, well, either all of them are just whatever, they're all not true, or one of them is true. Have you ever thought about it that way? Like,
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of common goals in religions. I think that, again, I go back to, for me, it's about meaning making, and how we do that. And so I think, again, some of the basic messages of the monotheistic traditions are about justice and how to live together with one another in ways that bring about a better world for everyone, right? So you could interpret, the Bible has been interpreted to justify all sorts of things, slavery, sexism, these sorts of things. That today I would say those are bad interpretations, right?
Yeah.
That's using religion to wield power over others. And I think that, again, most religious traditions are about trying to create a new world because there's a recognition that this doesn't work, and that is a new kingdom on earth, right? Not in some sort of otherworldly realm, but like trying to create a better planet Earth.
So you think that's what the interpretation of what you think the Bible was, like talking about a new kingdom here on earth and trying to replace and overrule the...
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, to me, that's the most compelling, convincing idea. It fueled the civil rights movement too. Martin Luther King Jr. In many ways. So it was that vision, right? Creating a new kingdom here on earth, right? That was just for everyone, in which there is no slave or free, no male or female, no Jew or Gentile, right?
Yes.
That was meant for now, not to wait until the next life.
Interesting. I'll definitely like to hold that thought, because I saw a clip on that the other day where it was, Alex O'Connor?
Yeah. Actually,
Cosmic Skeptic,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
I love his interviews. Like, he's super good at interviewing. But I was watching something they did with Clifford Stewart, pastors, kind of went viral now. And he told him that. He was like, the no Jews or Gentile, no Jews, Gentile, no male or female, and kind of like explaining that. And they kind of went back and forth on that and what it meant. But that's a good point, because it's some of it is interpretation, and I think other of it is there's some things that are meant to be answered and that can't be answered regardless of what is being said. Like, you can't ever prove 100% certainty that, Jesus is God 100%. You leave it up to faith, but I think it was like that for a reason. It was like that for it to be genuine. It was like that for, it's the same thing, the analogy of, having a father. Like, if your father forced you to love you, that wouldn't be very nice. That wouldn't be like, wouldn't like that relationship, but because you have free will to come to him, see what he has to offer and who he is, then through that you say, oh, okay, now I understand it. But going along the line now with the religions, then would you say that there is an afterlife?
I'm pretty agnostic about that.
So what do you think happens? Like,
it could be a long dirt nap. I don't know. I'm not really sure. And look, I think there is a sense in which we could say, oh, we become one with the earth. Our atoms are recycled and resurrected into other bodies, like that eat our bodies or whatever. This sort of matter's neither created nor destroyed. It's just it changes hands. So our bodies are made up of other bodies, and we will be too at one point. But for me, I think your point about uncertainty, right? I think that is it's a really good point, and I always say that you can't, well, not just me, but you can't live a hopeful life if you're certain, right? Because certainty doesn't require hope. Doesn't require faith. I think certainty causes a lot of problems in the world, causes a lot of destruction. And to live in the face of and acknowledging, right, our humility, right, that we don't know what is ultimately, quote unquote, right or true or good. We have to live in hope that we are moving in the correct direction, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think if we were to know the truth, knowing how we are, like just as humans, we wouldn't obey it to the best of our ability or say like, I don't know, because again, I think that's why it's left up to faith for what you believe in. If you believe Jesus said, he is who he was, it's kind of like it was meant to be like that. Again, going back to the father analogy. But I want to mention something because I heard it a lot and genuinely curious. I heard it a lot in your lectures that I was watching online, a couple interviews that you had talking about a queer theory, something like that. I don't know if you wanted to explain on that or what exactly.
Yeah, so this is queer theory is just the study of human. Basically, it's a theory that talks about identity, and we usually think of ourselves as like we are born a certain way, and there's something essential to us, and men are like this, women are like this, these sorts of things. And what queer theory says is, look, that's all wrong. It's all constructed over time, right? So that, for instance, high heels, right? We think of as women's thing today, but they were actually created for Prussian soldiers so that they could fit their feet into the stirrups of a horse, right? So we think of high heels as something, that's feminine, but it hasn't always been that way, right? The ideal body type changes over time in different cultures, right? These sorts of things. And so what queer theory suggests is that we're actually all just as weird as anyone else. There are no norms. There's not an ideal type of human being or cow or giraffe or whatever. These are what we think of as ideals are constructed and change over time, right? So what it is it's a way to open up discussions so that, so for instance, you wouldn't say, I'm the stereotypical guy, and everybody that's not like me, there's something wrong with them, right? You wouldn't say to a child, you have to wear blue if they're a boy, and you have to like play baseball, and you have to, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So queer theory is just trying to open up that discussion, and there's a lot of discussion around religion and queer theory because religions also help to problematize certainty, where people thought they were certain. God comes along or the spirits come along or whatever and say, oh, no, you're just a mere human, right? Don't think that you actually know what ultimate reality is, right? It's much messier and queerer than you think.
Yes. But don't you think that there's certain things that are just biologically and just, not normally, but just, you could say scientifically, what it is? Like, for example, when we talk about like male and female, that's something like I've always had trouble understanding, because I understand where you're coming from, where the societal norms, because that's completely different. Societal norms saying, well, if you're a guy, you have to like blue. That I could understand. I like a guy, I like pink. There's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean, I think that I understand. But then the biological normals and the what we can prove scientifically, don't you think that's standard?
Well, no, I think
like going back to the male and female subject,
sure,
to be exact.
I guess what I would say is that in nature you find all different types of sexuality and reproduction, between hermaphroditic asexual reproduction to heterosexual reproduction to organisms that change sex over time, right? Lesbian lizards, these sorts of things you might say. And I think that like what happens is in this conversation is that we get all too focused on thinking that we can look to nature to say, haha, it's true, right? But at the same time, the Intersex Society of America, right? There's 1 in 1,000 births is somehow, intersex in some way. And usually, until very recently, the doctor made a decision, right? You're going to be male or female, right? So literally imposing one of 2 sex options up onto a child that was just born, right? So that's an example. What if we're all just much more fluid than that, And you again, in most cultures around the world prior to the introduction of usually monotheism, but usually Christianity or Islam, Islam in South and Southeast Asia, and Christianity in African Americas, there were multiple genders, and like most Native American traditions have 3rd spirits. There's the Hijra of India and Pakistan. There's the Wariya of Indonesia. There's almost every culture has more than just 2 gender options historically.
And what do you mean by, like, if you were born a certain way, or you came out male, but then the doctor decided, it was the parents decided, like how would that work?
Yes, another. I mean, if you're born intersex, usually it's just like it's not like what you think. You're not born like a hermaphrodite or something, but
Yeah.
there's like undescended testes and what otherwise seems like a female
Okay.
from the outside, or an enlarged clitoris that looks more like a boy phallus, right? And so when something like that happens, historically, the American Medical Association has said, "Oh, well, the doctor will just take care of that and choose whether it's going to be a boy or girl, depending on which one's easier to do." Right? And so I don't believe that's the practice anymore, because the Intersex Society of America said, "Look, let this child decide," right? Because what happens then is the child grows up thinking, "I'm this or that," and then goes through a huge identity crisis, and this sort of thing.
Don't you think that's also dangerous to say, well, let a child decide? Because, I mean, I have a 5-year-old sister. If she were to decide anything until she was 18 of what she was, I would think she's crazy, because children have, fluctuating thoughts, fluctuating what they believe. And I mean, I used to think I was an astronaut. I was all these different things. I mean, don't you think that's also a little bit dangerous?
No, I was gonna say not to let the child decide at 5 years old or something, but to let that person, once they are of a certain age, decide what they want to be. Right? Why are we so uncomfortable with ambiguity, right, and uncertainty? This is another thing that queer theory is trying to deal with. Right? Is we should live more in the uncertainty and ambiguity sometimes, instead of imposing our ideas upon the world, the rest of the natural world.
Well, do you think that's imposing, or do you think it's, again, going back to like a standard? Because, again, and this is me just genuinely trying to understand. And you see male, female, and then that's what it is. And then everything after that is a choice. It's not really there is other options. It's like, well, if you want to decide to identify yourself as whatever you want to identify yourself, that's what you think you are, but what you are is this type of thing. You don't think...
No, I think about it a little bit differently, again, because most cultures in the world have had historically more than two genders, for instance. There's a long tradition of third spirits and this sort of thing, right? So I think that is just as natural as a cis male or a cis female, right?
Yeah.
And so I think why not allow people to have options? What is being threatened, right? When you enable someone to say, "Oh, I want to identify as."
So then, what do you feel? And this is going a little bit more on the politics side, but I'm curious about it. So, what do you feel when the executive order, you saw the inauguration? One of the things he said was, now declaring that the U.S., United States of America, only has two genders, male and female. What comes to your mind? Is that dangerous? Is that a threat to society? Now that he said that, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's dangerous. I think it's
in what ways?
I think it's dangerous to actual bodies who are not cis male and cis female. I think it's an imposition of someone who has benefited from white patriarchal structures and societies, wanting to keep a certain identity of what it means to be human in place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think he's thinking? I mean, obviously, we don't know exactly what he's thinking, but what is the opposing argument when you say, looking at it from the perspective of Trump or anybody that says, there is only two genders. What do you think their point of view is of the danger of having more genders?
Yeah, I think that there is, first of all, there's lots of different responses to that. And some people really think that they are doing the right thing when they oppose the trans community or the queer community and this sort of thing. I guess what I would suggest is that what are you threatened by, right? Are you threatened by women becoming president? Is it women in the workplace, right? Are you threatened by queer people having leadership roles and this sort of thing? What is threatening about it, right? Because to me, whether it's the civil rights movement or the feminist movement or the queer movement, they're all trying to expand, right, that community of moral concern and justice to other people, right? we want to have the same rights, right?
What if it's not expanding but breaking? Meaning, again, if obviously I'm going to take a somewhat biased perspective because I am a Christian and I'm not ashamed to say that.
Yeah.
But, when you talk about the things that you talk about, what if it's not, expanding but breaking what is, and what is, the idea of a nucleus family in the United States that was, glorified, getting a home, doing all these different things. And now it's so much like, you talk about single motherhood. I think it was 20 something percent below, 20 something percent is sub 1950. Like around that time, it was 20 something percent single mothers. And now it's like 50, 60%. And, you have consequences. Now children grow up without a father, then you, so on and so forth. And there's a million different examples. But the reason I say that is because that's a large part of, yes, I believe women have equal rights and 100% should be. But when you talk about feminism and say, well, women, they don't need men and they don't need, well, then that's the effect of it. And the effect transcends because then the child grows up without a father, and then the child grows up with this and doesn't have, and I think there's a reason for that in a nucleus family. That's just one example. But the reason I'm saying is that do you think maybe the argument coming from this side is saying, well, we're not trying to stop you from expanding because, again, a couple years ago, it was, yes, we just want equal rights. Boom, got it. Then it's like the next step, well, now we want a little bit more than equal rights. Now we want special privileges to this. Just an example. But do you think maybe that's their argument? Well, we're not trying to stop you from expanding. We're just trying to stop you from breaking what currently is.
Yeah, but I would also push back a little bit that there's ever been anything like an ideal nuclear family except for more upper class people. Most families around the world live in large communities with extended family and this sort of thing.
Yes.
So the nuclear family is a very recent invention. It's a Victorian invention of the ideal family. Remember, if you're going to talk about Jesus' family, leave your family, follow me. We're going to start a new family. We're all one in God, right? Mm-hmm. Leave your nuclear family and follow me to start a new family, right?
Yeah.
So that's a different understanding. 12 guys roaming around the desert, probably some women too. That's a different understanding of family, right?
Yes.
That is, I don't know how you get a nuclear family out of that vision of creating a wider family path beyond kinship, right?
Yeah.
In which we're all one. Right?
Yeah. I guess when I say that, the point that I'm getting to is I think there's arguments on both sides because it is true. It's like, well, what are we threatening? What's the danger to us? Like, what are we doing? What, are we hurting you? Are we doing something? I believe for the majority, there's no danger or threatening that's being posed. But then you go to the other side, well, it just breaking up the traditional values. It's just breaking up, what is, and you just break. So I think both sides have arguments. But again, I don't know. I think there's just some standards, if that makes sense. Like going back to the gender thing, because that's just the most fresh thing that's on my mind. Like anything other than that is just a choice, and everybody has free will. You could do whatever you want, say or whatever, but it's a difference when that idea starts getting posed to children, it starts getting posed to education, it starts going down the ladder to people that shouldn't be able to make that decision. And you see it around the country. I think you saw it a little bit more last year and the years prior of, a child could say that they're whatever they want, and then they're that. Or if they want to change, sexes, they could do that. They could get puberty brought. And I think those things are destructive when we validate that. And I think that's the point that I'm getting to. And I don't know if you would add anything to that or disagree with that. Or?
Yeah, I think the bigger harm is imposing cisgendered concepts onto bodies that aren't cisgendered, right? So I don't think that there's going to be a huge, just like allowing gay people to get married is not going to mean that all these other people are going to become gay that weren't gay before, right? Yeah. It's just it's allowing people to inhabit their bodies in the way that they want to, in a happy way, right? So I don't think there's too much of grooming going on in elementary schools or anything. I think that's sort of used as a fear tactic. Mm-hmm. But I don't think just because someone would tell me it's okay to be X, Y, or Z doesn't mean I'm going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to do that, you know?
Yeah. So then what's the, what is it? Again, going back to what I said previously, it's kind of like, well, it was the rights, and then after the rights, it was like kind of like the pushing, because now you see, you know, the parades and all this different stuff, which again, I don't think that's destructive to society. I only think it's giving a special favor or a special privilege when I think we're all created equal, going back to, you know, what we were talking about. But, you know, at what point does it become just pushing ideologies instead of saying, well, you are what you are. I mean, that's fine. It's your choice. I'm not going to, you know, argue with that. But at what point does it become pushing? Because, I mean, especially the last year, we'll see a lot of parades. I will see every corporation had to have some type of, you know, gay something, which isn't bad, but it's a difference between acceptance and then pushing. You know what I'm saying? Because equally so, if the same thing were to be like in all the corporations would push across or push Christianity, or the same argument would be made, if you get what I'm saying. So it's kind of just me questioning, well, if this was to be done, then that would be demonized. But because this is done, it's normalized, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the premise, but I mean, this is what I would say. I don't think it's pushing.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a patriarchal society, women have to fight harder for their equal rights and their equal pay, which most women still don't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a cisgendered society, people that are trans have to fight harder to get recognition. In a racist society, people of color have to fight harder to get recognition, right? So parades and all these sorts of things are developed out of a sense of, oh wow, we finally got our, you know, our rights, right?
So just for recognition, you would say.
Let's celebrate, you know, all this
Celebration and
diversity.
recognition, you would say. Okay.
I think that's fine, and you know, I mean, we celebrate a lot of things in this country all the time that are Christian.
Yeah.
The holidays that everybody gets off and this sort of thing, they're all
Yeah.
based in this. So I don't think that anything's being taken away. I think that in a pluralistic society, you have to provide space for all sorts of different identities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I mean, it's not.
No, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I think that's one of those things that everybody has their different point of views. I guess my deal with that was just getting to a position where playing both sides, because I understand the argument that you're making. I can see the argument that they're making. Everybody has, you know, equal arguments. And just going back to what I said, you know, some people believe that it's pushing versus, you know, accepting. Some people believe, no, it's just accepting. And like we said, it's recognition. Well, I think everybody has their point of views on that. But I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.
I really do. You know, I think more of this needs to be had, because I also believe, and I don't know what your take on this is that whether you believe this, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Christian, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, it doesn't mean that you're any less of a person. And I think what happened the last 4 years is that, you know, just because you didn't agree with me, I'm not going to talk to you. Hey, you know what? You're just from both sides, both politics sides, both of you are gay, if you're straight. It doesn't matter. Both sides are playing that. And I think what needs to happen is a sense of, okay, I may not agree with you, and I may think you're crazy, and I may think, but I want to hear you out. Like, let me talk to you. Let me see where you're coming from so I could understand better and say, oh, okay, you know, still don't agree with you, but at least I understand where you're coming from. I think regardless, that needs to be had more of, regardless of wherever you come from.
I think I agree with you 100%. And it's, the polarization that's happened in this country is super problematic, and I see it in my classrooms. I always go back to the political philosopher Hannah Arendt, who's a German political philosopher. And she said, look, the polis, the public space, is a space where you come together to share ideas, not come with ideas fully formed and charge each other and may the strongest person win. But it's about coming and having a conversation, the ability to be converted to another's point of view.
Yeah.
And the more we lose that open public space, the easier we fall into things like totalitarianism and these sorts of things.
Yeah,
like violence comes when we can't speak to each other.
Which is why I think it's embedded in our Declaration of Independence and our Bill of Rights of, you know, free speech and a right of choosing your religion and whatever. I think that's important, because when you do think about it, founding fathers were Christian, and they could have said, well, you have to be Christian, but they said, you know, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. And I think those are foundational things of America that both sides aren't doing the best on, whether you're Republican, Democrat, gay, straight, whatever it may be. Yeah. And I think hopefully this was just one step along the way of getting to a better communicated society.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I hope so too.
Yeah.
So-
Well, I appreciate your time. Is there anything you want to leave off on the viewers?
No, thank you for having me.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I hope that we could do it again. Thank you very much.
All right, sure.